to continue the vile practices that have been revealed and discussed in this debate. I reserve my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Arizona.
Once again, I want to make sure that everybody understands that you are giving federal oversight of collusion and monopoly. In class action lawsuits, what you're doing is not giving it all away, but you're limiting the vast improprieties that occur right now with class action. This is carefully manipulated so that we're moving the ball down the field, and it balances it out with competition and having some oversight over our jurisdiction of judgments that are impugned with class action. Class action has gotten way out of line, and most American people do understand that classification. I yield back the balance of my time.
All time having been yielded back, the question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona, and those in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, the ayes have it, the amendment is agreed to. Now, in order to consider amendment number 6, printed in House Report 112 through 416. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in House Report number 112-416, offered by Mr. Stearns of Florida.
Pursuant to House Resolution 591, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. At this time, the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and I reserve such balance of the time that I require and need. My colleague from Utah, Mr. Matheson, and I have a very simple amendment today. It's a Good Samaritan Health Professional Amendment. This amendment would allow trained professional medical people to volunteer across state lines to assist in presidentially declared federal disaster sites. My colleagues, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, we saw firsthand how much of a demand there is for trained professionals at disaster sites and how there is need to provide a liability protection for these very experienced individuals. According to the Council of State Governments, the most pressing need immediately after Katrina was the availability of medical volunteers. However, out-of-state practitioners providing medical treatment face a real possibility of non-coverage under their medical malpractice policies. Those that volunteer and treat the sick are at risk of violating existing statutes and potentially facing criminal or administrative penalties or civil liabilities. Baton Rouge newspaper, The Advocate, ran a story in September 2005 that talked about a Dr. Mark Perlmutter, who was in the midst of giving a woman chest compressions when FEMA asked him to stop because of issues of liability protection. CNN ran a story about a doctor who was evacuated to the New Orleans airport. The doctor was amazed to see hundreds of sick people and wanted to help them. He wanted to apply his professional talents and heal the sick, but was prevented from doing so because of legal liability. Quote, "They told us, you know, you could help us by mopping the floor." And that's what he was forced to do. And so he mopped the floor while people died all around him. What was the cost of inaction because of litigious society that we have? It's incidents like these, my colleagues. That's why I introduced the Good Samaritan Health Professional Act, H.R. 3586. It's a very simple bill, and its foundation is for this amendment to the PATH Act. This amendment would allow medical professionals to volunteer at disaster sites. It would provide limited civil liability protection to medical volunteers who act on a good faith effort. This is limited protection. It still allows victims to sue for serious acts such as criminal misconduct, reckless misconduct, or gross negligence. It does not cover criminal acts by health volunteers. You shouldn't have someone that spent years in college, years in medical school, through residency, spend years as a practicing physician, push a mop when there is clear need for their services. This is wrong, and my amendment will correct that. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to the Stearns Amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The problem here is we don't have a problem. The 1997 law, which is called the Volunteer Protection Act, which I don't recall being mentioned, already provides immunity to all volunteers, not just doctors, to everybody, all volunteers, and has worked very effectively to ensure that nonprofit or government entities remain responsible for background checks. I remind my colleagues of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which is violated in H.R. 5, which preserves our system of federalism that allows states to legislate their own state tort laws and the qualifications of healthcare professions. What could be more simple than that? This is one of the least debated provisions of our great Constitution. And so amendments that limit liability of healthcare professionals by our Congress and provides a virtual blanket immunity to any individual for any harm while acting in a volunteer capacity during a disaster violates the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Madam Speaker, I reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, how much time do I have left on my side?
Gentleman from Florida has 2 minutes and 15 seconds remaining, and the gentleman from Michigan has 3 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Florida.
The one thing I would say to the gentleman, this is not unlimited. As I pointed out, there is provisions to allow for stipulations. I recognize a co-sponsor on the Democrat side, Mr. Matheson from Utah, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I stand in strong support of this amendment, as I do to the underlying bill. The amendment before us will provide the much-needed liability protections to medical professionals to ensure they're able to do what they're trained to do, which is save lives. As Mr. Stearns indicated, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, it became clear that a uniformity of Good Samaritan laws is needed in this country. In several instances, qualified and certified physicians and other medical professionals from across the country were turned away from providing much-needed and critical care to victims of this disaster. Even when it was plainly apparent that the medical resources in the communities that were affected by the disaster were far beyond the capacity to provide adequate emergency care. You know, doctors from Utah who volunteer to provide emergency care in situations such as this shouldn't fear unnecessary lawsuits, and above all else should not be turned away due to uncertainty about liability protections. I want to thank my friend and colleague Mr. Stearns for his work and his partnership on this amendment. This common-sense measure to provide sensible protections to those Good Samaritans who volunteer their medical services to help those struck by disaster is an amendment we should all support. I urge colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this bipartisan amendment.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Madam Speaker, I raise a question to my good friend from Florida. Why don't we just, if you feel strongly about this, why don't we modify the Volunteer Protection Act of 1997 rather than to go into the business of a constitutional violation by changing all of the state laws with this wholesale limitation of liability? Why not do it in a more appropriate way, which we would be bound to consider with you? And I yield to the gentleman if he cares to make a comment on that.
Gentleman from Florida wish to take the time yield?
Is the gentleman yielding me time?
Yes.
You're yielding me time? Well,
believe it or not.
All right, Mr. Conyers, the point is this is a federal disaster. And in a federal disaster like Katrina, in which the federal government's involved, you want to have a bill that's a federal bill. And so it's not conducive to having 50 separate states.
The Volunteer Protection Act, I say to my colleague from Florida, is a federal bill enacted in 1997. And that's the one that I would urge you to want to join with me and others to modify if there is a problem. What you're doing by Stearns Matheson is that you are now changing the law in all 50 states without going through the Volunteer Protection Act over which we have jurisdiction. And that's the reason that I urge my colleagues that there is no need to upend existing state laws to provide unnecessary immunity. And I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Michigan reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I just say that the 50 state laws are not allowing a physician to help. He has to mop the floors. And I recognize Mr. Franks from Arizona. 45 seconds. He's chairman of the Constitution Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee.
From Arizona for 45 seconds.
Madam Chair, I just rise in strong support of this very common sense amendment by my friend Mr. Stearns from Florida. This amendment is to provide liability protection to health care workers who volunteer to help in disaster response for their fellow human beings. Madam Chair, rescue efforts can be often chaotic, and without the help of volunteers, government agencies cannot always help everyone effectively. Many state tort laws, including those of Louisiana, the state hardest hit by Hurricane Katrina, are unclear in regards to who is covered under state Good Samaritan protections. Madam Chair, this is a country of Good Samaritans. We should encourage our fellow human beings to help their fellow human beings and not offer impediments to them. And I think this amendment does that, and I support it with the strongest conviction. You yield back.
The gentleman from Michigan.
Madam Speaker, that's what we're doing under the Volunteer Protection Act, is protecting our volunteers, our good citizens that come forward. Please, I would like to focus on the amendment here that provides a lesser degree of liability protection while allowing weaker state standards to remain in place. What we need to do is to preserve our system of federalism and support the Volunteer Protection Act, which is constitutional, which does not violate the prerogative of the states to manage their and legislate on their own tort laws and determine the qualifications of healthcare professionals.
Gentleman's time's expired. All time has expired. The questions on the amendment from the gentleman from Florida, and those in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
A recorded vote.
Gentleman from Florida requests a recorded vote, and pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in House Report 112 through 416 on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 1, Mr. Woodall of Georgia. Amendment number 2, Ms. Bonamici of Oregon. Amendment number 6, Mr. Stearns of Florida. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. And the unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 1, printed in House Report 112 through 416 by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Woodall, on which further proceedings had been postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by a voice vote, and the clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in House Report number 112-416, offered by Mr. Woodall of Georgia.
Recorded vote has been requested, and those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device, and this will be a 15-minute vote.
So we have the House today finishing up work on a bill that would repeal the Independent Payment Advisory Board and place ceilings on medical malpractice awards. A series of 6 votes here, beginning with 3 amendments and then a likely procedural motion. That should be followed by a vote on final passage, and this could wrap up legislative work for the week here in the House. President Obama is on the road today. He is continuing his 4-state energy tour. This morning he's in Cushing, Oklahoma, where he plans to sign a directive ordering the expediting of permits for the southern portion of the Keystone XL pipeline. He'll also be talking about his commitment to domestic energy production. That's just about to get underway in Cushing, Oklahoma. You can see it live online at cspan.org, and we are hoping to get the President's remarks here during some of the votes. Well, a short time ago, we did speak with a reporter covering the debate over the Protecting Access to Health Care legislation. Here's what she had to say about the bill. Emily Etheridge writes for Congressional Quarterly. Emily, first things first, what's the purpose of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, or IPAB, that the House has been debating? And then, why are House Republicans proposing to have it repealed?
The board is part of President Obama's health care law, and it's meant to restrict Medicare spending growth. So if it gets too high, if we're spending too much money on Medicare, the board would make recommendations to cut that spending. So it's a way to kind of keep the Medicare spending in check. Republicans want to do away with it because they think that it would end up limiting care for Medicare beneficiaries.
And there are also provisions regarding medical malpractice awards. How did they come to be a part of the bill?
Well, the GOP leadership decided that they would add the medical malpractice provision to the IPAB repeal bill, partially as an offset because repealing the board does score as adding to the deficit, so they needed to make up that money somehow, but also because it's just a huge priority for Republicans. It's one of the big tenets of their health care program to have medical liability changes, so they wanted to kind of get two hits in one.
What are Democrats saying about the move to add medical malpractice language to a bill repealing IPAB?
A lot of the Democrats are really upset about it. Actually, the IPAB repeal bill on its own had a few Democratic supporters. Some Democrats co-sponsored it. A lot of them voted for it in committee and were ready to vote for it on the floor as well. But once Republican leadership added this malpractice issue on top of it, Democrats said, we can't support this anymore. And they're angry that they feel that Republicans gave up a chance at a bipartisan bill.
So is there any connection between the House taking up this bill now and the Supreme Court's debate next week on the validity of the health care overhaul law?
Definitely. It's a perfect timing for them. They're, on this campaign to repeal and replace the health care law, and we've got the anniversary of the health care law this week, the Supreme Court argument starting next week, so this is really a great time for them to capitalize on that issue.
Will this bill pass today with only Republican support?
There will be a few Democrats who support it. On the rule vote yesterday, about 5 Democrats voted for the rule for the bill. Those are also Democrats, though, who voted against the health care law itself. So you're not seeing people who supported the law switching over to also support this repeal. It's people who've always been opposed to the health care law.
What's likely to happen with this bill in the Senate?
It's not going anywhere in the Senate this year. Even John Cornyn is the senator who has the companion bill in the Senate, and he told us last week that this is really an issue for maybe next year if they get more Republicans over in the Senate. But other than that, it's not going to pass.
Emily Etheridge is a staff writer for Congressional Quarterly. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
And votes on amendments to the bill underway now, with a vote on final passage expected later this morning. As this vote over health care continues on the House floor, a quick reminder that the Supreme Court will consider the constitutionality of health care next week. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, the justices will hear oral argument on the case. Washington Journal will dedicate all 3 days to the health care debate with discussions with experts and your phone calls, emails, and tweets. We'll also bring you the audio of the oral argument beginning at about 2 p.m. Eastern each day. We'll air it on C-SPAN 3, C-SPAN Radio, and online at cspan.org. President Obama is speaking now. Let's go to him live in Cushing, Oklahoma.
Thank you so much for your hospitality. It is wonderful to be here. Yesterday I visited Nevada and New Mexico to talk about what we're calling an all-of-the-above energy strategy. It's a strategy that will keep us on track to further reduce our dependence on foreign oil, put more people back to work, and ultimately help to curb this spike in gas prices that we're seeing year after year after year. So today, I've come to Cushing, an oil town, because producing more oil and gas here at home has been and will continue to be a critical part of an all-of-the-above energy strategy. Now, under my administration, America is producing more oil today than at any time in the last 8 years. That's important to know. Over the last 3 years, I've directed my administration to open up millions of acres for gas and oil exploration across 23 different states. We're opening up more than 75% of our potential oil resources offshore. We've quadrupled the number of operating rigs to a record high. We've added enough new oil and gas pipeline to encircle the earth and then some. So we are drilling all over the place right now. That's not the challenge. That's not the problem. In fact, the problem in a place like Cushing is that we're actually producing so much oil and gas in places like North Dakota and Colorado that we don't have enough pipeline capacity to transport all of it to where it needs to go, both to refineries and then eventually all across the country and around the world. There's a bottleneck right here because we can't get enough of the oil to our refineries fast enough. And if we could, then we would be able to increase our oil supplies at a time when they're needed as much as possible. Now, right now, a company called TransCanada has applied to build a new pipeline to speed more oil from Cushing to state-of-the-art refineries down in the Gulf Coast. And today I'm directing my administration to cut through the red tape, break through the bureaucratic hurdles, and make this project a priority. So go ahead and get it done. Now, you wouldn't know all this from listening to the television set. This whole issue of the Keystone Pipeline has generated, obviously, a lot of controversy and a lot of politics. And that's because the original route from Canada into the United States was planned through an area in Nebraska that supplies some drinking water for nearly 2 million Americans and irrigation for a good portion of America's croplands. And Nebraskans of all political stripes, including the Republican governor there, raised some concerns about the safety and wisdom of that route. So to be extra careful that the construction of the pipeline in an area like that wouldn't put the health and the safety of the American people at risk, our experts said that we needed a certain amount of time to review the project. Unfortunately, Congress decided they wanted their own timeline. Not the company, not the experts, but members of Congress who decided this might be a fun political issue, decided to try to intervene and make it impossible for us to make an informed decision. So, what we've said to the company is we're happy to review future permits. And today we're making this new pipeline from Cushing to the Gulf a priority. So the southern leg of it, we're making a priority, and we're going to go ahead and get that done. The northern portion of it, we're going to have to review properly to make sure that the health and safety of the American people are protected. That's common sense. But the fact is that my administration has approved dozens of new oil and gas pipelines over the last 3 years, including one from Canada. And as long as I'm president, we're going to keep on encouraging oil development and infrastructure, and we're going to do it in a way that protects the health and safety of the American people. We don't have to choose between one or the other. We can do both. So I just, if you guys are talking to your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, your aunts or uncles, and they're wondering what's going on in terms of oil production, you just tell them, anybody who suggests that somehow we're suppressing domestic oil production isn't paying attention. They are not paying attention. What you also need to tell them is anybody who says that just drilling more gas and more oil by itself will bring down gas prices tomorrow or the next day or even next year, they're also not paying attention. They're not playing it straight. Because we are drilling more, we are producing more, but the fact is producing more oil at home isn't enough by itself to bring gas prices down. And the reason is we've got an oil market that is global, that is worldwide. And I've been saying for the last few weeks, I want everybody to understand this, we use 20% of the world's oil. We only produce 2% of the world's oil. Even if we opened up every inch of the country, if I put a oil rig on the South Lawn, if we had one right next to the Washington Monument, even if we drilled every little bit of this great country of ours, we'd still have to buy the rest of our needs from someplace else if we keep on using the same amount of energy, the same amount of oil. The price of oil will still be set by the global market. And that means every time there's tensions that rise in the Middle East, which is what's happening right now, so will the price of gas. The main reason the gas prices are high right now is because people are worried about what's happening with Iran. It doesn't have to do with domestic oil production. It has to do with the oil markets looking and saying, you know what, if something happens, there could be trouble, and so we're going to price oil higher just in case. Now, that's not the future that we want. We don't want to be vulnerable to something that's happening on the other side of the world somehow affecting our economy or hurting a lot of folks who have to drive to get to work. That's not the future I want for America. That's not the future I want for our kids. I want us to control our own energy destiny. I want us to determine our own course. So, yes, we're going to keep on drilling. Yes, we're going to keep on emphasizing production. Yes, we're going to make sure that we can get oil to where it's needed. But what we're also going to be doing as part of an all the above strategy is looking at how we can continually improve the utilization of renewable energy sources, new clean energy sources, and how do we become more efficient in our use of energy. That means producing more biofuels, which can be great for our farmers and great for rural economies. It means more fuel-efficient cars. It means more solar power. It means more wind power, which, by the way, nearly tripled here in Oklahoma over the past 3 years, in part because of some of our policies. We want every source of American-made energy. I don't want the energy jobs of tomorrow going to other countries. I want them here in the United States of America. And that's what an all-of-the-above energy strategy is all about. That's how we break our dependence on foreign oil. Now, the good news is we're already seeing progress. Yesterday, I went in Nevada to the largest solar plant of its kind anywhere in the country. Hundreds of workers built it. It's powering thousands of homes, and they're expanding to tens of thousands of homes more as they put more capacity online. After 30 years of not doing anything, we finally increased fuel efficiency standards on cars and trucks. And Americans are now designing and building cars that will go nearly twice as far on the same gallon of gas by the middle of the next decade. And that's going to save the average family $8,000 over the life of a car. And it's going to save a lot of companies a lot of money because, you know, they're hurt by rising fuel costs as well. All of these steps have helped put America on the path to greater energy independence. Since I took office, our dependence on foreign oil has gone down every single year. Last year, we imported 1 million fewer barrels per day than the year before. Think about that. America, at a time when we're growing, is actually importing less oil from overseas because we're using it smarter and more efficiently. America is now importing less than half the oil we use for the first time in more than a decade. So the key is to keep it going, Oklahoma. We've got to make sure that we don't go backwards, that we keep going forwards. If we're going to end our dependence on foreign oil, if we're going to bring gas prices down once and for all, as opposed to just playing politics with it every single year, then what we're going to have to do is to develop every single source of energy that we've got, every new technology that can help us become more efficient. We've got to use our innovation. We've got to use our brain power. We've got to use our creativity. We've got to have a vision for the future, not just constantly looking backwards at the past. That's where we need to go. That's the future we can build, and that's what America's always been about, is building the future. We've always been at the cutting edge. We're always ahead of the curve. Whether it's Thomas Edison or the Wright brothers or Steve Jobs, we're always thinking about what's the next thing. And that's how we have to think about energy. And if we do, not only are we going to see jobs and growth and success here in Cushing, Oklahoma, we're going to see it all across the country. All right? Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
The 700s are by like PC time. Right now it's at 11:46. So if you know if you
to make sure nobody's taking her. Hit the talk button for me.
President Obama shaking hands in Oklahoma, another stop in his four-state energy tour. You can see all the president's remarks from Cushing discussing the Keystone XL pipeline online at cspan.org in the video library. We'll also have it later in our schedule. President today signing an executive order speeding permits for construction of the southern portion of the Keystone XL pipeline. After that, he will be heading to the Center for Automotive Research at Ohio State University. We'll have more comments on domestic energy, and we will be covering those remarks on the C-SPAN network. Tonight, it's back to the White House for a reception in honor of Greek Independence Day.
173. 2 voting present. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 112 through 416 by the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report Number 112-416, offered by Ms. Bonamici of Oregon.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Votes now on the second of 3 amendments to this measure repealing the Independent Advisory Board within the health care law. As the House has begun 2-minute voting, this motion would prevent the bill itself from taking effect until HHS issues a report on how the bill might affect health care premiums.
are 179 and the nays are 228. Voting present, 1. And the amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment Number 6, printed in House Report 112 through 416 by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Stearns, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment Number 6, printed in House Report Number 112-416, offered by Mr. Stearns of Florida.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request of a recorded vote will rise and be counted. Though sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered, and members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote, a 2-minute vote.
And now on to the third of 3 amendment votes on repealing the Independent Advisory Board within the health care law. 2-minute voting underway, and after this we expect debate on a procedural motion, more votes, including a vote on final passage. House Speaker John Boehner just finished up his weekly briefing, and we'll have that for you a little bit later this morning. Also right now live on Capitol Hill for the second time this week, it's testimony from the commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, General John Allen. He's with the acting Defense Undersecretary James Miller, and they're talking about the situation in Afghanistan. Earlier this week, before the House Armed Services Committee, General Miller said that he plans to analyze security conditions in Afghanistan after the last of the surge forces leave this fall, before making any recommendations on further troop reductions. He's testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee this morning. It's live right now on our companion network, C-SPAN 3.
The yeas are 251 and the nays are 157. Voting present is 1. The amendment is adopted. And there being no further amendments under the rule, the committee rises.
Madam Chairman.
In the whole House of the State of the Union has had under consideration H.R. 5, which is the House Resolution 591. I report the bill as amended by that resolution back to the House. Sundry further amendments adopted in the committee of the whole.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 5. And pursuant to House Resolution 591, reports the bill as amended by that resolution back to the House with sundry further amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded on any further amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole? If not, the Chair will put them in gross. The question is on the adoption of the amendments. Those in favor, please say aye. Those in favor, please say no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to improve patient access to health care services and provide improved medical care by reducing the excessive burden the liability system places on the health care delivery system.
The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Iowa seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
I am opposed in its current form.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Loebsack of Iowa moves to recommit the bill H.R. 5 to the Committees on Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce with instructions to report the same to the House forthwith with the following amendment. At the end, the following new section. Section 203, prohibiting elimination of Medicare program and increased costs or reduced benefits to seniors and people with disabilities. A, the repeal of Section 1899A of the Social Security 42 U.S.C. 1395 KKK pursuant to Section 202 of this Act shall not, with respect to the Medicare program under Title 18 of the Social Security Act, be construed as furthering or promoting any of the following. 1. Eliminating guaranteed health insurance benefits for seniors or people with disabilities under such program. 2. Establishing a Medicare voucher plan that provides limited payments to seniors or people with disabilities to purchase health care in the private health insurance market or otherwise increasing Medicare beneficiary costs. B. The repeal of Section 1899 C2AII of the Social Security Act 42 U.S.C. 1395 KKK C2AII pursuant to Section 202 of this Act shall not, with respect to seniors or people with disabilities, be construed as providing for or promoting any of the following. 1. Rationing health care. 2. Raising revenues or premiums for seniors or people with disabilities under Section 1818 of the Social Security Act, Section 1818A of such Act.
The clerk will suspend. The clerk will suspend. The gentleman from Tennessee. Gentleman from Tennessee.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the bill.
Objection to dispensing with the reading of the resolution. Without objection, reading is dispensed. House will come to order. The gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, while I oppose the underlying bill, I'm offering this final amendment on a topic that I know is important to all of us here in this chamber, our nation's seniors. I grew up in poverty, and my grandmother took care of my siblings and me during my childhood. Thank you. She relied on Social Security survivor benefits to put food on the table. And because of her, I know firsthand how important programs like Social Security and Medicare are to our seniors. In my grandmother's case, it meant the difference between putting food on the table and my family going hungry. Before these historic programs were enacted, Mr. Speaker, House not in order.
House is not in order. The House will be in order. The gentleman may continue.
Before these historic programs were enacted, far too many seniors struggled just to meet their basic needs, let alone access the appropriate medical care to keep them safe and healthy. These important safety net programs have been incredibly successful as well in lowering senior poverty rates in America. Just like my grandmother, today's seniors made sacrifices big and small to pave the way for a better life for future generations. Our country is what it is today because of them. That is why I believe that seniors who worked hard all of their lives should have access to the best medical care available. We need to care for them just like they cared for us. If my colleagues join me in passing this amendment, it will be incorporated into the bill and the bill will be immediately voted on. It would ensure that the underlying bill does not eliminate guaranteed health insurance benefits for seniors or people with disabilities on Medicare. It would also ensure that the underlying bill does not lead to a voucher system, ration health care, raise premiums and copayments, or otherwise restrict Medicare benefits. I recently held senior listening sessions around my district in Iowa. When I talk to Iowa seniors, I hear far too often that many of them are struggling just to make ends meet. That is unacceptable. No hardworking American should ever have to retire into poverty, and they certainly shouldn't see their hard-earned savings wiped out because of medical bills. During my listening sessions, I heard time and again from seniors about how much they rely on Medicare in order to stay healthy and stay afloat financially. Seniors' medical and prescription drug costs already eat up a growing portion of their income, and many of them are stretched thin, even without rising gas prices, utility costs, and an economic downturn that has hit savings hard. They pay attention to what is happening here in Washington. We should all be reminded of that. And they're upset about proposals to cut and weaken Medicare. Our seniors did not get us into the fiscal mess in the first place that we're in today, and I think it's unfair to punish them for Washington's irresponsible behavior. They cannot and they should not bear more of this burden. Unfortunately, the Republican plan for Medicare would force seniors to do just that. It would end the Medicare guarantee, replacing it with a voucher system. The voucher would not keep up with health care inflation, and it would force seniors to pay more and more of their health care costs out of pocket. In these tough economic times, we need to find ways to be more efficient while maintaining quality of care. There are ways to do that, such as moving Medicare from a fee-based to a value-based payment system, something that I have supported all along since I've been in this Congress. However, the Republican plan for Medicare ignores these options and instead undermines traditional Medicare while doing nothing to reduce health care costs. This would shift costs to beneficiaries. For low-income seniors like my grandmother was, enacting this plan could be disastrous. That is why my final amendment would ask the members of this chamber simply to uphold their commitment to America's seniors. From my listening sessions, I know that seniors don't want a voucher that forces them to buy insurance in the private market.
Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentlemen will suspend. The House will come to order.